Good day everyone, I'm Janine for you and I'm going to discuss the chapter 21, which is the regret aversion bias. The regret aversion is one of the behavioral finance topics and is the subject of the study. Investors tend to avoid regret that will live in the future. However, this tendency is damaging to their portfolio. The purpose of this study is to examine theoretically the regret aversion, its impact on investors' behavior, and how to deal with these biases. We have here the general description. People exhibiting regret aversion avoid taking decisive actions because they fear that in hindsight, whatever course they select will prove less than optimal. Sabi dito yung mga taong nag-i-exhibit ng ganitong bias, which is the regret aversion bias, iniiwasan yung paggawa ng isang desisyon dahil nangangamba sila or nanghihinayang sila dahil kung ano man yung piliin nila, ang result pa rin nun is less than optimal. This cognitive phenomenon that often arises in investors, causing them to hold onto losing positions too long in order to avoid admitting errors and realizing losses. Regret aversion can also affect person's response to investment gains. For example, if you're owning a stock whose value has increased recently, but due to regret aversion, investors prepare to hold the stock for more increase to avoid any regret. So, dito, yung mga investors, they try to hold the stock. Naghihintay pa sila na mag-increase pa yung value ng stock to avoid regret. Regret aversion also make people unduly apprehend about breaking into financial markets that have recently generated losses. When they experience negative investment outcomes, they feel instinctual driven to conserve, to retreat, and to lick their wounds, not to press on and snap up potentially undervalued stocks. Regret aversion does not come into play only following a loss. It also affects person's response to investment gains. People exhibiting regret aversion can be reluctant or mabigat sa loob nila, for example, to sell a stock whose value has climbed recently. An investor is said to suffering from regret aversion bias when he or she refuses to make any decision because of fear that will turn out to be wrong and then may later lead to feeling of regret. The emotional process behind this is pretty simple. Regret causes emotional pain, hence the brain tries to avoid making decisions that cause regrets. Next, we have the technical description. Regret causes people to challenge past decisions and to question their beliefs. People who are regret averse try to avoid the stress arising from two types of mistakes, which is the errors of commissions and errors of omissions. An error is said to be an error of commission which is incorrectly recorded in the books of account. Kung yung accounts clerk or bookkeeper na nagre-record, mali yung pagka-record nila sa book of accounts, maybe due to ignorance, negligence, inexperience, carelessness, or lack of complete knowledge. While sa error of omission naman, it falls in the type of clerical errors, which is one of the two major types of accounting errors. Errors of omission results when the accountant forgets to enter. Kapag nakalimutan ng accountant na i-record yung transaction sa book of accounts. So remember, error of commission, incorrectly recorded. While error of omission, accountant forgets to record or enter the transaction in the book of accounts. Regret is different from disappointment because of the former implies that the sufferer and some sense of agency is achieving the negative outcome. Regret is the most palpable and takes the greatest toll on decision making when the outcomes of foregone alternatives are highly visible or accessible. So when making decisions, we only try to avoid regret. Depending on circumstances, this bias pushes us in one of two different directions. Dalawa lang yung puntahan natin. Either first, a downturn in the markets that affect our investment might lead us to avoid making further investments because we want to avoid the regret that would come with incurring further losses, even though a period of losses or period of lower market prices may present attractive longer-term buying opportunities. Or second, if we see or hear about a popular or trendy new investment opportunity, we might decide to join a crowd and buy in because we want to avoid the regret of missing out, or the FOMO, which stands for fear of missing out. This tendency, often called herd behavior, could lead us to take risks that aren't appropriate for our financial circumstances. Next, we have the implications for investors. Regret aversion causes investors to anticipate and fear the pain of regret that comes with incurring a loss or forfeiting profit. Regret aversion can cause investors to be too conservative in their investment choices. If I suffer losses in the past, for example, or I have felt pain because of the very poor decision making, as an investor, I may shy away or try to avoid making new bold investment decisions and only accept low risk position. Di ba nga may sinasabi sila na low risk, low gain. High risk, high gain. So dito, sa regret aversion may cause investors to be too conservative. Kahit low gain ka, at least low risk. Kaya mas pipiliin ko as an investor to accept low risk positions. Next, regret aversion can cause investors to shy away and truly from markets that have recently gone down. Regret aversion leads investors to prefer stock of subjectivity designated in good companies, even when an alternative stock has an equal or higher expected return. Regret aversion can cause investors to hold onto losing position too long. Regret aversion may also lead to an excess of conservatism, especially if one wants to avoid a repeat or past losses caused by risk assets. Regret aversion can cause herding behavior because of some investors buying into a apparent mass consensus can deem it a potential for future regret. Needless to say, the demise of the internet stock bubble and the demise of housing bubble that happened from 2003 to 2006 demonstrated that even the most massive herd can stampede in the wrong direction. Regret aversion leads investors to prefer stock of subjectivity designate for good companies, even when alternative stock has equal or higher expected return. So, yun na nga. So, we have here examples of regret aversion bias. So, regret aversion need not always to be negative. In some cases, these biases may help investors from making wrong decisions. For example, if a buyer has already lost money by investing in an overheated market, the regret aversion will prevent them from investing in peaking markets the next time. Regret aversion occurs by a fear of either commission or omission. In other words, it is a prospect of committing a failure or omitting an opportunity that we seek to avoid. The concern of committing to a failure, for example, such making investment, can loom over one's preference. People sometimes think less about making a good decision and more about avoiding a bad one. This anticipation of regret over making the wrong choice is often factored into decision making as a form of emotional insurance. So regret aversion can also have positive effects when it becomes positive. So when the potential regret can act as a motivator, dun siya nagiging positive. Example number 1, fear of missing out. Ito yung FOMO. Have you ever heard someone say that you have bad FOMO? Sometimes they are saying essentially is that they are highly susceptible to regret aversion. FOMO often occurs when people make a decision out of fear of missing out on opportunity as they might regret decision in the later date. For example, it's weekend. Ikaw gusto mo na lang mag-relax. Gusto mo na lang magstay sa bahay, mag-movie marathon. Yung gusto mong gawin, magpahinga ka. But suddenly, your friend called, tapos sabi, may party sa bahay nila. Ikaw, kahit pagod ka, sa isip mo, ano kaya mangyayari dun sa party? Ano kaya mangyayari dun na maari kong ma-miss? Yun dun mapasok yung fear of missing out. Kaya, bis na magpahinga ka na lang sa bahay, pipiliin mo pa rin na pumunta doon kasi nga takot ka na may ma-miss ka na opportunity. So, here the advice for the investors. First, investing too conservatively. No matter how many times an investor has been burned by ultimately unprofitable investment, risk is still a healthy ingredient in any portfolio. Sabi nga nila, the higher the risk, the higher the gain. So next, staying out of the market after a loss. There is no principle more fundamental in securities trading than by law, sell high. Nonetheless, many investors' behavior completely ignores this directive. Holding losing position too long. The first loss is the best loss. While realizing losses is never enjoyable, the wisdom here is that following an unprofitable decision is the best to cut those losses and move on. So, dito kung naglo-loss ka na, ba't mo paaalagaan yung loss mo, di ba? Huwag mo nahintayin lalo pa siyang may loss. Try to cut those losses and try to move on. Herding behavior. If you're a practitioner and you believe that the decision your client has made reflects a herd mentality, then it can help to stop and question the investor's motivations. Preference for good companies. Investors often think they can save face by buying stock in a good companies. Example ng good companies ay GE or Coca-Cola. Holding winners too long. It's time to entertain the final wall of street action. You never get hurt taking a profit. Next slide, how to avoid regret aversion bias. Acknowledging what we overestimate, the likelihood of regret can help turn away regret aversion. Additionally, accepting outcomes as they are rather than dwelling in regret can make some prospect less adversive in the future. So guys, is there such a thing as no regrets nga ba? So for me, there are no regrets in life, just lessons. Always remember this, guys. Regret is a huge waste of your time and energy because it's completely impossible to go back in the time and change the past. Instead, we should all spend more time focusing in our present and future to ensure that we have no more regrets later down the line. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening.